Before we embark on this incredible journey together, I have a small heartfelt request. Please subscribe to my channel. Give this video a like. It costs you nothing but means the world to me. And let me know in the comments which beautiful corner of the world you're watching from. Your support truly makes a difference. The emails from my brother David arrived every Tuesday at exactly 3:47 p.m., like clockwork. They all started the same way. Subject: Data Flow Analytics, Weekly Update. Professional, detailed, complete with charts showing website traffic growth, client acquisition metrics, and revenue projections that would make any investor proud. I was sitting in my kitchen in Millbrook, New York, scrolling through the latest update on my laptop when something caught my attention. The timestamp on one of his client meeting photos read 2:34 a.m. My stomach dropped. Either my brother was holding business meetings in the middle of the night, or the $90,000 our parents had invested in his revolutionary data analytics startup was funding something else entirely. What started as innocent curiosity quickly became something much more serious. I'd always been the responsible one in our family. While David charmed his way through college and bounced between creative projects, I built a steady career as a forensic accountant. Our parents, Helen and Robert Mitchell, owned 3 successful hardware stores across upstate New York. They'd worked their entire lives to build something lasting. When David pitched them his startup idea last fall, they didn't hesitate. Their golden boy needed $90,000 to launch Data Flow Analytics, a platform that would help small businesses optimize their data usage. The presentation was flawless. Professional business plan, sleek logo, even a functioning website prototype. This is David's moment, Mom had told me over dinner at Romano's restaurant on October 12th. He's finally found his calling. I'd nodded politely, pushing around the chicken parmesan on my plate. At 34, David had tried music production, freelance graphic design, and even a failed attempt at becoming a YouTube influencer. Each venture lasted exactly long enough to drain his savings before he moved back into our parents' basement. But this felt different. The business plan included detailed financial projections, market research, and a timeline for profitability. David had never shown this level of preparation before. The Tuesday email updates started in November. Every week, David would send a comprehensive report to our parents, copying me as the family's financial advisor. The reports were impressive: client acquisition numbers, website analytics, revenue streams from 3 different service tiers. According to his updates, Data Flow Analytics had acquired 12 clients by December, with monthly recurring revenue of $8,400. The numbers looked legitimate: professional invoices, payment confirmations, even testimonials from satisfied customers. Our parents were thrilled. Dad called me 3 times during Christmas week to share David's latest success stories. "He's already talking about hiring his first employee," Dad said, his voice full of pride. "We always knew he had potential." I wanted to believe it too. David deserved success after years of false starts. Maybe he'd finally matured enough to build something real. But those Tuesday emails bothered me for reasons I couldn't articulate. Something about the consistent timing, the polished presentation, the way every metric showed steady, predictable growth. In my experience with small business accounting, real startups were messier. Growth came in spurts. There were setbacks, unexpected expenses, revenue fluctuations. David's reports read like a textbook example of a perfect startup trajectory. That's when I decided to look more closely at the details. The first red flag was buried in a screenshot of David's client dashboard. I was reviewing his January 15th update when I noticed something odd in one of the interface images. In the bottom right corner of his screen, partially obscured by a business chart, was a small icon I recognized immediately: the Discord logo. Discord wasn't necessarily suspicious on its own. Plenty of businesses use it for team communication. But when I enlarged the image and adjusted the brightness, I could see part of a chat window. The visible text read, "Raid tonight at 9, need tank and..." My brother's revolutionary business dashboard was apparently sharing screen space with gaming coordination chats. I started paying closer attention to the timestamps in his photos. The late-night strategy session from January 22nd was taken at 1:47 a.m. The client call preparation image from February 3rd showed 3:21 a.m. David claimed he was putting in 18-hour days building his company, but the evidence suggested he was keeping vampire hours that aligned more with online gaming schedules than business meetings. Then I found his streaming profile. A casual Google search for David Mitchell Gaming led me to his Twitch account, Dark Phoenix/DM. The profile showed him playing World of Warcraft for 6 to 8 hours every night, with streaming sessions that perfectly coincided with his reported client work hours. His last stream, from February 8th, lasted from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. According to his Tuesday email the next day, he'd spent that exact time frame optimizing server architecture for increased client load. I sat in my car outside the Starbucks on Main Street, staring at my phone screen. 18 months of accounting training had taught me to follow the money trail, but this felt personal in a way that made my hands shake. Our parents weren't just funding David's gaming hobby. They were funding an elaborate deception. I needed more evidence before I could confront anyone. Accusations without proof would just make me look like the jealous sister trying to sabotage David's success. Our parents already thought I was too critical of him. They'd dismiss my concerns as sibling rivalry unless I could provide undeniable evidence. That night, I created a fake Discord account and joined the gaming server listed on Dark Phoenix DM's profile. I told myself it was just research, but sitting in my home office at midnight, pretending to be interested in guild recruitment, felt uncomfortably like spying on my own family. The guild members knew David well. They called him by his gaming handle and discussed his expensive new gaming setup. "Dude got the new RTX 4090 last month," one player typed. "His parents think he's building a business empire." My stomach lurched. The gaming setup comment led me down a rabbit hole that revealed the true scope of David's deception. I spent the next morning cross-referencing David's business expense reports with gaming equipment retailers. His January purchase of high-performance computing hardware for $3,200 wasn't server equipment for client data processing. It was a top-of-the-line gaming rig from Micro Center in Albany. The office furniture expense of $100 to $800 was actually a custom gaming chair and adjustable desk from DX Racer. The professional lighting equipment for $600 was RGB lighting strips and streaming cameras from B&H Photo. Every business expense had a gaming equivalent. The $2,400 backup server was a PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X bundle. The client communication software subscriptions were premium accounts for gaming platforms: Discord Nitro, Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, and several MMO monthly subscriptions. David had essentially created a fake business to fund his gaming lifestyle, complete with receipts that would pass casual inspection from our trusting parents. I found his real Amazon purchase history through a lucky break. He'd accidentally included a shipping confirmation email in one of his business updates, and the tracking number led to an order for $400 worth of gaming accessories. The delivery address was our parents' house, where David still lived in the converted basement. My phone rang while I was documenting the evidence. Mom's contact photo filled the screen. "Sarah, honey, have you seen David's latest numbers?" Her voice bubbled with excitement. "He's projecting $15,000 in monthly revenue by March. Robert and I are thinking about investing another $50,000 to help him scale faster." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Mom, can we talk about this in person?" "Of course. Why don't you come for dinner Sunday? David's going to present his expansion plans." Sunday was February 18th. I had 4 days to decide whether to expose David's lies or find another way to protect our parents from losing even more money. The weekend arrived too quickly. I sat in my Honda Civic outside our family home on Oakwood Drive, watching the warm light spill from the kitchen windows. Dad's truck was parked next to David's newer Jeep Wrangler, another business expense that our parents had helped finance. The house smelled like Mom's pot roast when I walked in. David was already at the dining room table, laptop open, looking every inch the successful entrepreneur in his crisp button-down shirt and khakis. "There's our financial expert," he said, standing to hug me. "Ready to hear about the next phase of data flow analytics?" His confidence was unsettling. Either he genuinely believed his own lies, or he was a more accomplished actor than I'd ever realized. Mom served dinner while David launched into his presentation. Revenue projections, market expansion opportunities, plans to hire a development team. The slides were professionally designed, the financial models looked sophisticated, and his delivery was polished enough for a TED Talk. The initial investment has exceeded all expectations, David explained, clicking to a chart showing steady upward growth. We're ready to capture market share before competitors enter the space. Dad leaned forward, engaged and proud. What's the timeline for the additional investment? I'd like to move quickly, within the next 2 weeks, ideally. The pressure to expose David's deception became unbearable as I watched our parents prepare to lose another $50,000. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead slipped down to David's basement setup. What I found confirmed my worst fears and provided the final pieces of evidence I needed. His home office was actually a gaming paradise. 3 monitors displaying World of Warcraft, Discord chats, and a Twitch stream preparation screen. Gaming headsets, RGB keyboards, and professional streaming equipment filled every surface. A whiteboard showed raid schedules and gaming tournament brackets, not business meetings or client calls. Most damning was a notebook lying open next to his keyboard. David's handwriting detailed his weekly routine. Tuesday 3 p.m., send parents business update. Thursday morning, stream prep. Friday night, guild raid leadership. He'd scheduled his deception like any other recurring appointment. I took photos of everything with my phone, my hands trembling as I documented my brother's elaborate lies. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Back upstairs, David was showing Mom and Dad testimonials from his satisfied clients. I recognized several names from his gaming guild. The glowing reviews weren't from business customers, praising data analytics services. They were from gaming buddies, praising his leadership skills in online raids. "Sarah, you've been quiet tonight," Dad observed. "What's your professional opinion on David's expansion plans?" The room fell silent. David's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of nervousness crossing his features. He knew I had the skills to scrutinize his numbers more carefully than our trusting parents ever would. "I think we should discuss the financials more thoroughly before any additional investment," I said carefully. "Of course," David said quickly. "I have all the documentation ready for review." "Including bank statements showing the revenue deposits?" His confident smile faltered. "The banking relationship is still being optimized. Most payments are processed through the platform's payment system." Translation: there were no revenue deposits because there were no real clients. Mom looked between us, sensing tension, but not understanding its source. "You two have always been so different in your approaches," she said diplomatically. "David's the visionary, Sarah's the detail person. Together, you make a great team." I wanted to scream. David wasn't a visionary. He was a skilled manipulator who'd turned our parents' love and trust into funding for his gaming hobby. But exposing him publicly, in front of our parents who were so proud of his apparent success, felt cruel. These weren't strangers who deserved to lose money through poor due diligence. These were our parents who'd worked their entire lives to build something they could share with their children. "Why don't I review the financial documents tomorrow?" I suggested. "David, can you send me the detailed banking records and client contracts?" "Absolutely," he agreed, but I caught him swallowing hard. We both knew those documents didn't exist. David's response to my request for financial documents arrived Tuesday morning at 9:23 a.m., 3 hours earlier than his usual Tuesday report schedule. Subject: Data Flow Analytics, Documentation Request. "Hey, Sarah. Thanks for the interest in reviewing our financials. I've been working on organizing everything for the audit requirements anyway. However, I'm in the middle of migrating to a new banking system, and there's been some delays with the document exports. Should have everything ready by next Friday. Also wanted to mention that I'm exploring some partnership opportunities that might change our funding needs. We'll keep you posted." David. The email was a masterclass in deflection. No specific documents, no timeline commitment, and a hint that the expansion plans might change to avoid scrutiny altogether. I forwarded the email to my work computer and printed it for my growing evidence file. 20 years of forensic accounting had taught me that delayed documentation requests were usually the first sign of fabricated records. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "David says you're helping with the business review. So proud to have both my kids working together." The guilt was overwhelming. Our parents genuinely believed they were witnessing their children's professional collaboration, not realizing they were funding an elaborate deception while I gathered evidence to expose it. I needed an outside perspective. That afternoon, I called my colleague Janet Morrison, a fellow forensic accountant who specialized in fraud investigation. We'd worked together on several cases involving family business disputes. "Janet, hypothetically speaking, if you discovered a family member was defrauding your parents, how would you handle it?" "Hypothetically?" Janet's laugh suggested she wasn't fooled by my phrasing. "It depends on the scope of the fraud and the victim's vulnerability. Are we talking about sophisticated investors who should know better, or trusting family members who've been emotionally manipulated?" "The latter." "Then you document everything, present the evidence privately to the victims, and let them decide how to proceed. The goal isn't punishment, it's protection from further harm." "What if the fraudster is someone you care about, despite everything?" Janet's voice softened. "Sarah, the kindest thing you can do for everyone involved is stop the deception before it gets worse. Family fraud usually escalates because early interventions are avoided to preserve relationships." After hanging up, I spent an hour staring at my evidence file. Photos of David's gaming setup, screenshots of his Twitch streams, expense reports that didn't match his actual purchases, and now his evasive response to my documentation request. I had enough evidence to prove the fraud, but using it would destroy David's relationship with our parents and likely fracture our family permanently. My phone rang at 6:30 p.m. David's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, Sarah. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about that document review. I know you're just being thorough, but I'm worried Mom and Dad might think you don't trust my business judgment." "I'm just doing my due diligence." "I get that. But they're so excited about the expansion. If we delay everything for paperwork reviews, we might miss the market opportunity." His tone was casual, but I detected an edge of desperation beneath the confident facade. "David, the documents shouldn't take long to review if everything is as successful as you've reported." A long pause. "Of course, it's just, you know how complicated business finances can be." I knew exactly how complicated fraudulent finances could be. The breaking point came Thursday evening when Dad called me with news that made my blood run cold. "Sarah, I wanted to give you a heads up. Robert and I met with our accountant today about liquidating some retirement investments to support David's expansion. We're thinking of increasing our investment to $75,000 instead of $50,000 and $75,000, nearly double their original investment, money they'd need for their own future security. Dad, please don't make any financial decisions until I finish reviewing David's books. Honey, we appreciate your thoroughness, but David needs to move quickly. His competitors won't wait for family approval processes." I closed my eyes, imagining my parents' retirement savings flowing into David's gaming equipment fund. "Can you give me until Monday? Just 4 more days?" "I suppose that's reasonable. David's documents should be ready by Friday anyway." After hanging up, I sat in my car outside my apartment building, watching other people walk their dogs and live their normal lives while my family teetered on the edge of financial disaster. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Heard Dad called you about the timeline. Thanks for being flexible." He knew exactly what pressure our parents were under and was using it to avoid scrutiny. I texted back, "Documents ready tomorrow as promised?" "Working on it. Bank export is taking longer than expected." "Which bank?" 3 dots appeared and disappeared multiple times before his response. "First National Business. Their system is outdated." I knew First National's business banking platform well from several clients. Document exports were automated and instant. David was lying again, but at least now I knew he was getting desperate. Friday morning, I drove to First National's branch office on Central Avenue. The business banker, Margaret Chen, had helped several of my clients with account documentation. "Hi, Margaret. I'm helping my brother with some financial records for a family business review. He mentioned having trouble with document exports from your system." Margaret looked puzzled. "What's the business name? Our export system has been working perfectly all week." "Data Flow Analytics. The account holder would be David Mitchell." She typed for a moment, then frowned. "I'm not showing any business accounts under that name or David Mitchell. Are you sure he banks with us?" My suspicions were confirmed. David didn't have a business account at First National, or probably anywhere else. There were no client payments to export because there were no real clients. "Thank you for checking," I managed, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I sat in the bank parking lot, finally accepting what I'd known for weeks. David's entire business was fabricated. Every client, every revenue report, every professional milestone was fictional. Our parents had invested $90,000 in an elaborate fantasy, and they were about to invest $75,000 more. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. I organized my evidence into a comprehensive presentation, cross-referenced David's lies with documented proof, and prepared for the most difficult conversation of my life. Monday morning, I called Mom and asked if we could meet privately before David arrived for his scheduled presentation. "Is everything okay, honey? You sound stressed. I need to show you and Dad something important about David's business. Can we meet at 10 a.m.? "Of course. Should I tell David to come early?" "No," I said quickly. "Just you and Dad first." I arrived at my parents' house 15 minutes early, my evidence folder clutched against my chest like armor. Mom greeted me with her usual hug, but I could see concern in her eyes. "Sarah, what's this about? You've seemed tense all week." Dad emerged from his home office, reading glasses perched on his nose, looking like the successful businessman he'd worked 40 years to become. These were good people who'd trusted their son because that's what loving parents do. "Let's sit down," I said, setting my folder on the coffee table. "I have some information about David's business that you need to see." "Is there a problem with his numbers?" Dad asked, settling into his favorite recliner. "The growth projections seemed solid to me." "That's just it. The projections aren't real. None of it is real." I opened my folder and began laying out the evidence methodically, the way I would for a client fraud case. Photos of David's gaming setup where his office should be, screenshots of his Twitch streams during reported client calls, purchase records showing gaming equipment instead of business hardware. "I don't understand," Mom said, picking up a printed screenshot of David's Discord chat. "What is this?" "It's a gaming communication platform. David spends 6 to 8 hours every night playing online games during the exact hours he claims to be working on client projects." Dad studied the evidence with the careful attention he'd honed through decades of business ownership. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something approaching anger. "These timestamps," he said, pointing to David's late-night gaming sessions. "These are when he says he's doing client work?" "Yes, and this," I handed him David's expense reports next to the real purchase receipts, "shows what he actually bought with your investment money." The silence stretched unbearably as my parents processed the scope of David's deception. Mom kept shaking her head, as if refusing to accept what she was seeing. "But the client testimonials," she said weakly, "the revenue reports." "The testimonials are from his gaming friends. The revenue reports are completely fabricated. There are no clients, no business bank account, no actual company." Dad's hands trembled slightly as he set down the papers. 40 years of business experience had taught him to recognize fraud when he saw it, even when it came from his own son. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "I suspected for several weeks. I confirmed it Friday when I checked with First National Bank. David doesn't have a business account there or anywhere else." Mom stood abruptly and walked to the window, her shoulders shaking. When she turned back, tears were streaming down her face. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" The question I'd been dreading. I wanted to be absolutely certain, and I hoped I was wrong. The sound of David's Jeep in the driveway made us all freeze. He was early for his expansion presentation, probably eager to secure the additional $75,000 before anyone looked too closely at his documentation. "Do you want me to handle this?" I asked. Dad straightened his shoulders, businessman persona reasserting itself. "No, this is our family. We'll handle it together." "Robert," Mom said, wiping her eyes. "What are we going to say?" "The truth," he replied grimly. "And then we're going to figure out how to move forward." The front door opened, and David's cheerful voice filled the hallway. "Good morning, everyone. Ready to talk about Dataflow's next phase?" He walked into the living room carrying his laptop and presentation materials, looking confident and prepared. His smile faltered when he saw the evidence spread across the coffee table and our grim expressions. "What's all this?" he asked, but his voice had lost its easy confidence. David's confident facade crumbled the moment he recognized his own Discord messages among the papers scattered across our parents' coffee table. "I can explain," he started, but Dad held up his hand. "Sit down, David." The authority in Dad's voice was absolute. David sank into the opposite chair, his laptop bag sliding to the floor. His eyes darted between the evidence and our faces, calculating rapidly. "Before you say anything," Dad continued, "I want you to know that Sarah has presented compelling evidence that your business doesn't exist. No clients, no revenue, no business bank account, just gaming equipment purchased with our investment money." Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. "Is this true?" David looked at each of us in turn, and I watched him make the decision to abandon his deception. His shoulders sagged, and when he spoke, he sounded like a defeated child instead of the confident entrepreneur we'd been listening to for months. "It started small," he said. "I really did want to build a business. I had the idea, I wrote the business plan, I even built a prototype website." "But you never launched it," I said. "I tried, but it was harder than I expected. The technical challenges, the marketing, finding actual clients, everything I'd made look easy in the business plan was incredibly difficult in reality." Dad's jaw was tight. "So you decided to lie instead?" "I was going to figure it out. I just needed more time. And you guys were so proud of me for finally getting my act together. I couldn't disappoint you again." "So you kept taking our money while playing video games all night?" Mom's voice was shaking with a combination of hurt and anger I'd rarely heard from her. The gaming was supposed to be just stress relief while I worked on the real business. But the business problems kept getting more complicated, and the gaming was easier. It felt good to be successful at something, even if it was just leading raids and building my streaming audience. "You have a streaming audience?" I asked. "About 300 regular viewers. I make maybe $200 a month from subscriptions and donations." The irony was staggering. David had actually built a small online business through gaming, earning modest real revenue. But instead of presenting that honest achievement to our parents, he'd created an elaborate fiction about data analytics. "Why didn't you just tell us the truth?" Mom asked. "We might have been disappointed, but we wouldn't have cut you off." David's laugh was bitter. "Really? You would have been thrilled to invest $90,000 in your 34-year-old son's gaming hobby? You would have bragged to your friends about David the professional video game player?" The question hung in the air. Our parents had always struggled with David's creative pursuits, viewing them as hobbies rather than legitimate career paths. Their pride in his business success had been partially rooted in relief that he'd finally chosen a conventional path. "That's not the point," Dad said firmly. "The point is that you lied to us for months and stole $90,000. "I was going to pay it back," David protested, "once I figured out the real business, or saved enough from streaming, or found another way." "With what money?" I asked. "You don't have a job. You live in Mom and Dad's basement, and you earn $200 a month from Twitch. How exactly were you planning to repay $90,000? David had no answer. Mom stood up suddenly. "I need some air," she announced, walking toward the back door that led to her garden. Dad watched her go, then turned back to David. "Your mother and I were planning to invest another $75,000 in your expansion. We were going to liquidate retirement investments to give you that money." David's face went white. I didn't know you were considering retirement funds. What did you think we were using? We don't have $90,000 lying around. For the first time since the confrontation began, David looked genuinely horrified, rather than just defensive. The devastating reality of David's deception settled over our family like a heavy blanket in the days that followed. Mom barely spoke to David for a week. She'd built her identity around being a supportive mother who believed in her children's potential, and learning that she'd been systematically deceived by the son she'd defended and funded struck at her core sense of judgment. Dad approached the situation like the businessman he was, focusing on practical solutions. He wanted a full accounting of where every dollar had gone, a timeline for liquidating the gaming equipment, and a concrete plan for David to start repaying the debt. "I've talked to legal counsel," Dad told me during a private phone call. "We could pursue criminal charges for fraud, but that would destroy any chance of recovery and tear the family apart permanently." "What's the alternative?" David moves out immediately, gets a job within 2 weeks, and starts repaying the money. No more financial support from us for anything. He's an adult who made adult choices, and he needs to face adult consequences. The conversation with David took place the following Sunday, in the same living room where his deception had been exposed. He'd spent the week packing up his gaming equipment and preparing for a move to a studio apartment across town. "I found a job at Best Buy," he announced without preamble. "Assistant manager position. It's not much, but it's a start." Dad nodded. "What's your repayment plan?" David pulled out a handwritten budget on notebook paper. "After rent and basic expenses, I can contribute $800 per month toward the debt. At that rate, it'll take about 8 years to repay everything, assuming no interest." "There will be interest," Dad said firmly. 5% annually, compounded. This is a business debt now, not a family gift." I watched David do the mental calculation. His face paled as he realized the true scope of his financial obligation. "I accept those terms," he said quietly. Mom spoke for the first time since entering the room. "What I don't understand is why you continued the lie for so long, even after we started talking about additional investments." David stared at his hands. "Every week I told myself I'd figure out a way to make it real. I'd launch the actual business, or find real clients, or somehow turn the lie into truth before anyone discovered it." "But you never tried," I pointed out. "You spent every night gaming instead of working on the business you claimed to be building." "I know." The gaming felt manageable. Building a real business felt impossible. Mom's voice was quiet but steady. "David, I'm proud that you took responsibility when confronted. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about money. You've damaged our trust in a way that will take years to repair." "I know." "Do you? Because trust isn't something you can pay back with monthly installments. Every achievement you share with us now, every success you claim, we'll wonder if it's real. That's the long-term cost of what you've done." David nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "I understand, and I'm sorry." The apology felt genuine, but I could see in my parents' faces that sorry wasn't enough. David had stolen more than money. He'd stolen their confidence in their own judgment and their faith in their son's honesty. After David left to finish moving his belongings, I stayed to help my parents process the emotional aftermath. "We enabled this," Dad said, staring out the window at David's empty parking space. "We wanted to believe he'd finally succeeded so badly that we ignored obvious warning signs." "What warning signs?" I asked. "No client meetings at the house, no business phone calls we ever overheard, no networking events or industry conferences. We never met a single person from his supposed business." Mom sat heavily in her chair. "I kept telling myself he was just private about his work, but really I think I didn't want to look too closely." 6 months later, David's monthly payments arrived like clockwork, always accompanied by a brief note updating our parents on his progress. He'd been promoted to department manager at Best Buy, increasing his repayment capacity to $1,200 per month. More importantly, he'd started streaming his gaming sessions with complete transparency, building a small but loyal audience who knew his real story. "I made some serious mistakes and hurt people I love," he said during one stream I watched out of curiosity. "Now I'm working to make things right while doing something I actually enjoy." It's humbling, but it's honest. His viewer count had grown to over 800 regular followers, and his monthly streaming revenue had increased to nearly $600. For the first time in his adult life, David was earning money from something he genuinely enjoyed, without lies or deception. The family dynamics had shifted permanently. Our parents still loved David, but their relationship was more cautious now. They celebrated his small victories while maintaining healthy skepticism about his grander plans. "I think he's learning that real success is built on consistency, not dramatic breakthroughs," Mom told me during our weekly dinner. "And we're learning to trust, but verify." Dad had implemented what he called family business standards for any future financial discussions: documentation requirements, third-party verification, and cooling-off periods for major decisions. The approach felt clinical compared to our former trusting dynamic, but it protected everyone involved. The most surprising development was David's relationship with his gaming community. His honesty about his failures and commitment to making amends had resonated with viewers who appreciated authentic content over manufactured success stories. "Accountability is more interesting than achievement," one viewer had commented. "Most streamers pretend their lives are perfect. David shows the real struggle." During our family's Christmas dinner, David presented our parents with a check for $15,000, representing an extra payment beyond his normal schedule. "Streaming revenue has been good this year," he explained, "and I wanted to accelerate the repayment timeline." Dad examined the check carefully before setting it aside. "We appreciate this, David, but more than the money, we appreciate that you found a way to be successful without lying about it." "The real business is smaller and messier than the fake one," David admitted, "but it's mine." I watched our parents process this moment. Their son was paying them back with money earned from the same gaming hobby they'd once viewed as a waste of time. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. As we cleaned up after dinner, Mom pulled me aside. "I've been thinking about something you said during the confrontation, about how David had actually built a small business through gaming, but was too ashamed to tell us the truth." "What about it?" "I wonder how many of his problems came from our expectations. We were so focused on conventional success that we couldn't see the real progress he was making." It was a generous interpretation from a woman who had every right to remain angry, but it also reflected the complex reality of family relationships, where love and disappointment often intertwine in ways that resist simple judgments. David still had years of payments ahead of him, and our family's trust remained fragile. But watching him build something real from his honest interests gave me hope that his integrity might eventually match his ambition. Sometimes the most important lessons come through the most painful experiences, teaching us the difference between supporting someone's dreams and enabling their deceptions. 2 years have passed since I exposed David's gaming deception, and our family has found an unexpected equilibrium built on honesty rather than hope. David's streaming business, Phoenix Rising Gaming, now generates consistent monthly revenue between $2,000 and $3,500. He's partnered with gaming equipment companies for sponsorship deals and started offering coaching sessions for aspiring streamers. His transparency about his past mistakes has become part of his brand identity. "I'm not trying to be the biggest streamer," he explained during a recent family dinner. "I'm trying to be the most honest one." Our parents have paid off their retirement investment withdrawals and rebuilt their emergency fund. More importantly, they've developed healthier boundaries around financial support for adult children. "We love our kids enough to let them struggle when necessary," Dad told me recently. "Struggle builds character in ways that rescue doesn't." The $90,000 David stole has been reduced to $34,000 through consistent payments and bonus contributions from his growing business. At his current pace, the debt will be fully repaid within 18 months. But the real transformation isn't financial, it's relational. David calls our parents weekly now, sharing both his successes and setbacks without embellishment. When his streaming equipment broke last month, he asked Dad for advice about repair versus replacement costs, not for money to solve the problem. "I want to make good decisions," he said, "not easy ones." Our family gatherings feel different now, less performative, more genuine. We discuss David's business challenges openly, offering support without assuming responsibility for solutions. I've learned something important about family protection through this experience. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is expose a destructive lie before it causes irreparable damage. Enabling someone's deception isn't kindness. It's cowardice disguised as compassion. For parents watching adult children struggle, remember that your job isn't to prevent all failure. Your job is to love them enough to let them face the consequences of their choices while maintaining your own boundaries and security. And for those tempted to solve temporary problems with permanent deceptions, the truth always emerges eventually. The question isn't whether you'll be caught, but whether you'll take responsibility before the damage becomes irreversible. Trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, but only through consistent honesty over time. David is learning this lesson day by day, payment by payment, stream by stream. The most beautiful part of our family's healing has been watching our parents rediscover pride in David's authentic achievements. They brag now about his streaming partnerships and coaching success with the same enthusiasm they once showed for his fabricated business reports. Real success, it turns out, is more satisfying to celebrate than fictional triumph ever could be. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might benefit from learning about the power of honest accountability. And remember, sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is tell a truth that nobody wants to hear. Ara Mitchell.